most houses and most things that are built construction wise have tons and tons, literally metric tons of waste in dumpsters. When you look at one of ours, when we build a house, we have virtually no waste because we utilize technology to use all of the wood. And so that's exciting, and it's relevant because nowadays people don't like to see that there's waste, that we're cutting down forests and throwing them in landfills. That's a complete stupid thing that is archaic. We've disrupted that idea.
Welcome to Personal Finance Cat, where I share my personal take on personal finance. Hi, Damion. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too. We were just chatting a little bit before we started recording. I remember that I actually bought your book years ago after your Bigger Pockets podcast episode came out. So
it makes me really happy to hear that somebody bought my book. So I appreciate that very much.
Of course. Sounds like you have moved on. You said that helped you with your retirement.
Yeah. No, it's sort of funny because I've always thought that writing books was useful to help me clarify my thinking, and it never was really I don't think my writing is good enough to be a best-selling author where you make millions of dollars, but it was really helpful to clarify ideas and help communicate those to other people. Because if you write a book and then you actually think if it becomes readable, it generally means that you've had to think about something pretty deeply. It's easy to have stuff in our head that we think is clear. And so that's sometimes people say, well, why did you write all these books? And it was mostly because I wanted to understand what I was thinking about.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you've had a dozen of books that you published?
Yeah, I've read about 12 books. The last one was called Unicornomics, that was written a few years ago, and that was my experience of starting at the time about 50. Since then, it's I've started and launched and run over 70 companies, and this was like taking all of that experience and really boiling down these principles that, if you get those principles right, my belief is that first 15% in business or investing or anything else, you have an 85% likelihood of success. Whereas the quote and the thing that people think about is, well, most businesses fail. Like 90% fail in the first 5 years, and those that are survived after that 90% of those die in the next 5. And the reality is most businesses don't have that foundational 15%. So anything I do now, including FrameTech, my project here in Arizona, it's all based on starting with that foundational. And some of this is like biblical. It's like these are old principles, and we've heard people say, well, it's different now. It's 2024. Everything is different. And I think that things are different, but the principles have not changed. And I think if you honor and respect and embrace the principles, then you have this very high likelihood of success. But people violate them because they say, oh, I don't need to follow that. I can do it my way, or the TikTok way, or whatever people are doing.
Yeah. No, you have an amazing journey. I was looking at your bio before the episode, before the interview. You've started, and you mentioned briefly, you've started many, many companies. You mentioned 70 so far. So clearly you've done something right. And you mentioned that there are some biblical principles. I would be very interested to hear if you can sort of summarize. I will definitely go read your book too. What are these key principles, and how are they helping businesses stay in business, right? Instead of the 90% that fail.
Well, I think one of the key things is that when people start businesses, oftentimes they're trying to figure out how to make money. And you have to understand that and Buckminster Fuller really exposed this to my thinking, studying his books which if you ever try to read Bucky's books, it's very hard to get past about the second page because he's so smart. He literally is like an alien. And one of the key principles is that money is a side effect. And so most people are out trying to figure out how to make money in investing. They're trying to figure out how to make money in business. And the shift in that thinking, and the 70 plus businesses I've started, most of those didn't work. So way more than 50% did not work. I spent money to learn things. I didn't invest and then make money. It was, okay, that was another seminar. And so one of the things, the principles that I really understood after all these businesses is you start a business with the intention of solving a problem based on a mission. And when you start there, and then you build culture and you build people, the last thing that happens is that the money happens. And that's a side effect of getting the culture right, serving people, having a mission, solving a big problem. And in the beginning, when I was doing real estate, in the early 2000s, my thinking was more, I'm going to just make a bunch of money. And I know people want houses, but it was primarily it was about me making money, and I made money. I made millions. And then I think the universe said, well, you're not really focused on the right thing. And in 2008, I lost $25 million and was homeless. So that was an incredible opportunity for me to say, okay, what did I just learn? What just happened? And I spent a number of years really digging into that, asking what is true. And what is true is mission matters. Mission matters more than making money. Money is that side effect. It's like a honeybee. Like the honey is a side effect. The bee doesn't go out there and say, I'm going to make honey. It's like doing its cross-pollinating thing. And so when we think about that, our job is to go out there and cross-pollinate our skills and tools and networks and find something that matters. And that's really the biggest thing that I've learned, that is if you can start with this, you're going to be way ahead of me, is starting off with a focus on significance, on impact, and this isn't just some philosophical woo-woo. Like, after having started all these businesses, I can tell you there is something to this, and it's not going to change in 10 years. It's not different from 1950 or 1850. Serving people and doing something that matters, that solves that problem, really just allows money to take care of itself. I've made more money and created more wealth for other people and me in the last 3 years than I did in all the years combined, by a factor of 10 or more easily. And that was just because there was a shift in focus.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's amazing. I should have clarified earlier. The book that I bought from you was about QRP, Qualified Retirement Plan. A lot of real estate investors could really use that, because a lot of them are solo entrepreneurs. They just kind of invest real estate, but they use contractors. So they don't necessarily have a W-2 that they can sort of have an employer to sponsor their retirement plan. But it's very important, obviously, to plan for your retirement. So I think that would make sense. And then now that you explained how you started your journey being a real estate investor, and I gather maybe you were a flipper or a developer.
So in the beginning, I did a lot of one thing. I bought a lot of houses, and then I lease optioned them out. So I was really the bank. I was a landlord bank, if you will. And then one of the great lessons there, it's kind of a thing that's, I think it's important for people, is I started getting distracted by doing a lot of different things. And I thought, oh, well, I've already made money in real estate. Well, yeah, I made millions, but I hadn't made hundreds of millions. And the reality is, I didn't need to go do a dozen different things. I was developing condos and buying apartments and flipping $4 or $5 million houses and doing all these different things. I wasn't doing any of them very well. And that's one of the mistakes I see people making. They go, oh, I'll do a little of this. It's like a buffet of real estate. Instead of saying, okay, I'm going to focus on this one thing, get really, really good at it. The truth is, there's opportunity in anything, whether it's pencils or penthouses in downtown Chicago. There is an opportunity, but if you try to do all of it at once, you're not going to get anywhere.
I see. So yeah, what I was trying to get at is, I don't know like about your other businesses, but at least the QRP company that you created, which is called EQRP, I believe, that is kind of associated with real estate, right? Because even I think some of the people who use your service from EQRP, if they want to know what other investments they can get into, real estate is one of the good options. So my question to you is, all these businesses you have since started, have they been in some way related to real estate as well? Or they can be many different areas depending on your mission, where you are in life, etc.
So in the beginning, most of them were based on real estate. And then when the retirement space came up, that was really something that was less about real estate to start with. It was more about, how do I help people free their money from Wall Street and actually get empowered and be responsible and take control of their financial future. So that was where EQRP was born. And it was interesting because what most people like to do with their EQRP, with their 401k and their IRA money, was buy real estate. And that's evolved with people buying Bitcoin and gold and different things, which has been very cool. All of the stuff was centered, like you touched on it a second ago. It was all centered on freeing people from financial bondage. That was the mission. So EQRP and the funds that we've done, building Frame Tech, the manufacturing plant that's really disrupting the construction industry, all that stuff spun off of EQRP and the idea of freeing people and then giving them more opportunities, more tools, more training. It was all with that central focus. And real estate tends to be a lot of that. And it goes deeper than that. So yeah, the EQRP was like the first thing that led to the other things, but they all are definitely interrelated, and they all have to do with people being free financially.
Got it. Frame Tech, you said that it's going to disrupt the construction industry. What is the company exactly? Can you talk about that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So construction is a funny business. It's sort of like education. It gets disrupted about every 50 years, and it's very, very slow. Everything sort of stays the same. If you look at in America, you look at the educational system, hadn't changed much in the last 50 years, maybe 100 years. Construction is really no different. The nail gun was the biggest innovation in the last 50 years, but really not a lot has changed. And so a lot of the way that we build houses and apartments has been pretty much the same for decades and decades. When my partner and I were introduced to the idea, that the concept behind Frame Tech, we said, okay, I mean, this is interesting, but like we're not, like, we didn't know that much about the manufacturing space, very, very little, because we just, we built some houses, and the more we dug into it, we realized there's a huge problem. After 2008, 75% of the trades left. Like, all the reasons that we're having a hard time building things, it's because people just left and went and worked at Costco, or they started being influencers, or whatever, they retired. There's just a lot of people that are gone. So one of the things that you find in building houses and apartments is that it's really hard to have predictability. One, you don't know if people are going to show up and swing hammers. And two, things like trusses, it's really hard to know if you can get them, when you can get them. And we've solved all these problems. So we've got a predictable process. So effectively, Frame Tech is a vertically integrated framing company. So you give us your plans for a house, any house, track house, custom house. We take those plans, we build all the bones, all the wood, frames, the floors, the trusses in our plant, and then we go put your house together, all the wood pieces. And this whole process takes 2 weeks, from the time you give us your plans to the time you have a framed house, and you can have all of your electricians and plumbers right behind and scheduled. It's a 2-week process. That normally takes 2 or more months. So we've cut off 80% of the process. So people get a faster, more reliable process. They get something that's predictable, on time. And the quality is, whenever you manufacture something in a contained environment, imagine inside of a facility, we have 111,000 square foot facility. Imagine building something there versus building something in the middle of the sun and the storms and the rain and people stealing wood and making things that are off an inch here and off an inch there. So you have all these benefits of that environment and the way that we create this. So Frame Tech really is revolutionizing construction. And I mean, that's why there's so much interest. That's why so many companies have said, can we buy all of your product? And there are companies that are interested in acquiring the whole thing, because they understand this is disruptive to the whole industry. It's going to help solve the housing crisis.
Yeah, I mean, I know that it's been very challenging where I live to find houses, because the supply is just not there. To your point, I think maybe that's because there's a shortage of people who build houses, and then automating all of that is going to tremendously help with the supply issue. It sounds like your company is solving a very specific part of the problem, which is the framing. What about the other follow-on work, such as, like you said, plumbing and electrician and drywalls, this and that? So do you see that being kind of disrupted as well in the future, or what's your view on that?
I think that there's an opportunity. I have a friend named Mike Ayala who is in the HVAC space, has owned and is working on a project to really streamline that. That's one of the spaces that could use the plumbing, and the HVAC could use a lot of disruption and innovation. There, again, going back to the money versus the mission. If you have a mission to help fix a problem, there is a problem with all those spaces. And and I don't know what the solution is. I know what our solution is for the framing. So that's, I'm smart enough to know what I don't know. Usually, sometimes I think I know more than I know, but I know that there are brilliant people in these spaces that are working on solving those problems, and together we're going to solve this whole problem. Our niche is to be world class and the best at what we do, and that's the framing. But there is absolutely an opportunity in those spaces. So sometimes people say, "What should I do? What should I invest in?" And I was like, go find the biggest problem and then go solve it, or be a part of the solution, or find somebody that's working on solving it and join them. There's that is definitely a problem. There's a lack of supply. There's a lack of people doing things, and I think that we live in an interesting time, because we have more problems and more opportunities to solve them than ever before. So so I'm hopeful and I'm excited about seeing what and who comes up with ideas. And it's also an interesting question that people will ask: what about competition for frame tech, and for any business you're in? What about competition? And in frame tech in particular, if we had 300 more plants like ours that came online today, it would not solve the problem. There's such a gap. So our answer is bring them on. Like, let's go. It's going to make everybody better. It's going to help solve the problem. And so we don't look at this as a competition. We look at this as a cooperative effort to solve a huge problem, and everybody wins. Right now, everybody's losing, and that's the problem.
Yeah. When I saw, you founded this, or I don't know if you founded it or you are part of the company now, Frame Tech, the immediate thing that came into mind is 3D printing, because I've seen some 3D printed houses, and they're not quite there yet. I can sort of tell, even though I'm not a construction person, but I do feel like there is huge potential, right? Because I feel like a lot of the things can be solved by putting it as a process that machines or robots or whatever can do, instead of relying on people. It's not building a rocket, so you think that there can be better solutions to free up people's time and resources and cost. Yeah, I agree completely. There are a lot of opportunities in the real estate space. So, but then how did you kind of get into just framing? Did you stumble upon this company and saw the potential, or how did that come about?
So it's funny. It was a master plan scheme that I had for a total joke. It was where coincidence ran into opportunity, and going back to something you said, and then I'll answer that question. The 3D printing is very exciting, and it's just one more part of the solution, and so we're excited about it. I think that I've heard of some 3D printed communities in Texas and other places where this is happening, and that's cool, and that has a place, just like tiny houses and manufactured houses. All these things have a part. They're part of the solution. I don't believe any of them are superior to another one. I think they're all part of it, because we need all of it. Like, there's such a gap in the market. In terms of frame tech, this came to us a few years ago, and we actually ignored the deal for about 6 months because we were busy. And so we were doing good at one of the key principles, which is say no to almost everything. We were saying no, and we were staying focused. And we laugh at ourselves now, because 6 months later, my partner David and I looked at this deal and said, this seems really good. And it was brought to us, to your question about how did this happen. A friend of almost 30 years, who I had literally started my real estate career knowing him, and we were both fairly early. He'd known about this, and he's like, you guys got to see this. You got to be part of this. So we finally looked at it, and then we flew out to Arizona from Alabama and sat down with the team, the frame tech operators that had the vision, and they told us what it was, and we had done some background on them and knew that they were the real deal, that they'd been around not for three or 4 or 5 years, but for 5 decades. Like, these guys, the guy, the visionary that has developed all the technology that's patented at this point, this guy has been doing this since the 1970s. He's 80 years old. Oh, wow. And so when you find people like that have gone down one narrow lane, and he hadn't done 50 different things, he did this one thing, and that's the kind of person you want. And there was a team around him of those people, and we said, we like your deal, and we like you guys, and we'll give you your $40 million. And so they said, you're full of crap. In their head, they said, there's no way these guys are serious. We've had lunch, and they're not going to give us $40 million. We started writing checks the next week. And it was because when you see something that has that much potential, it's that good, you don't need to think about it. It's that's the value of having experience. Like, I can see things, and most things are dog crap. They're terrible. Mm-hmm. And every once in a while, something shows up, and it's so obvious that this is the right people, the right vision, the right time. It's like, all right, what do we need to do? What do you guys need money? Great, we'll make that happen. And so that happened. Our investors got very excited, and we funded the deal, and that one's That one will come online this year, and it'll launch. We've got a second plant that is in the process of being built. That one's still, there's an opportunity there for people to participate, invest in it. And and ultimately, the reason that this got exciting was because everybody won. Like the investors win, the community wins. There's each of these plants directly hires a couple hundred people, and indirectly about 1,000. And the environment wins because it's almost all solar based. So there's virtually no impact on the environment or waste or anything. When we build, this is one of the coolest things. Most houses and most things that are built construction wise have tons and tons, literally metric tons of waste in dumpsters. When you look at one of ours, when we build a house, we have virtually no waste because we utilize technology to use all of the wood. And so that's exciting, and it's relevant because nowadays people don't like to see that there's waste, that we're cutting down forests and throwing them in landfills. That's a complete stupid thing that is archaic. We've disrupted that idea, and the technology allows us to be very environmentally sensitive to where we're going to be probably LEED's platinum. And that doesn't happen accidentally. That's very thoughtful. So everybody in the ecosystem, everybody that's part of this wins. It's not win-lose like Wall Street. This is literally everybody wins because it's cooperative. It's not competitive.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So when you say the technology is solar-based, what does that mean? So do they use like solar-based energy to produce the framing?
Yeah, so the solar that we have, so like our entire plant, 111,000 square feet plant, is covered in solar. So all of the energy that we're using is to produce the machinery, and everything is basically almost all of it's coming from the solar. Like, and then the actual technology that's patented is the technology that takes all the wood inputs and puts them together and then cuts them to spec. It's using a wood jointer, finger jointer system. And basically that just allows us to not have waste except for corner cuts. Mm-hmm. So ultimately we have, there's not just dumpsters and dumpsters of wood. There's little teeny piles of corner cuts, and that's it. Everything else is used, which is very efficient and very friendly to everybody.
That's awesome. So, and you said that the owner that sold you this business, he has done this for 50 years and he's in his 80s. So by the time you bought this company, I'm assuming it's already generating revenue and doing well. Is that the case, or?
So when the team came to us, they had been in this business since the 70s. They had a different idea, and the idea was to reimagine how a manufacturing plant was built. They had the idea, but what they missed, that what they were lacking was capital. So they had an idea. They brought us a napkin basically, okay. And they said, "Here's the idea." And we said, "We like your napkin. It's a very cool, it's a very pretty napkin." And so we decided to date the napkin, and very quickly we decided to get married. And so we've built this together. So we're all the founders in this. We started off with this idea and a great team, and so we're building this. This is the first one of its kind in the world, and likely will be the first of many. We've got people in Australia that are interested in licensing, and we know that there's interest in the U.S. of massively expanding this. So we didn't buy anything. We provided a part of the formula that I talk about in Unicornomics. It's the formula that's required to have something built and to succeed. You have to have capital. They didn't have capital. They had the ideas, they had the team, but it's, putting $40 million into something is not easy. Yeah. And especially with something that is just an idea. You need people that are brave and bold and have vision and can see it and can trust. And we had all those pieces there, which is why this works.
Got it. So you're in the process of building the factory now, or okay?
Yeah, the factory is built. The equipment is being put in place. The actual production starts this summer.
Oh, nice. And when do you expect your first product?
Product will be pushed out in the fall. So the fall of 2024, we'll have product that's coming out, and then it continues to expand. And the second plant is about a year and a half later that it'll have product. So it takes 2 to 3 years to go from start to production. And when you're building something, and it's one of the interesting things in general with investing, when people are thinking about real estate, or you're thinking about investing in whatever you're doing, if you're investing in something that goes from zero, like literally there's dirt, an idea, and then you build something that builds something, the opportunity there is so far greater than in anything that's already in existence, because what's already in existence is fairly easy. And there's a lot less risk, if you will. Going from dirt to a manufacturing plant. People that have showed up here in Arizona and walked into this thing are just blown away at how big and how incredible what we've built is. And that is hard. Doing something that's really valuable is hard. It's not easy. It's not turnkey. There's no overnight success. Like this required decades and decades of background and then years and struggle. And honestly, most people don't want to do that. They want something where they put their money in and they get a return 5 minutes later, and it's predictable. And so the reason I'm bringing this up, there's a huge opportunity for people to think about growing their wealth by being a part of something that's being built versus just saying, I want something that's already done.
Yeah. Yeah. So I recently finished the book of Elon Musk's biography, the one that came out maybe a couple months ago. Yeah, there's a lot of what you said kind of just reminded me of that, because he definitely built it from scratch, right? The whole company. And there were so many challenges. I mean, had it not been for him, I think Tesla probably would have died multiple times. There was so much sort of just him pouring his heart and soul, literally, into the company. And at some point, he had to put up his own money, like personal assets and such, into the business. And there were a lot of either supply chain problems or just logistic problems that had to be solved. And he put it off, but it was not easy. I mean, it was hugely difficult. So I understand completely what you were saying about building a manufacturing business. Yes, there were a lot of opportunities. Once you succeed, it's great, but from zero to that point, it's a lot.
Yeah. There's one of the things that we've learned. It's very interesting to see very conservative, whether it's banks or certain people, and their approach to something like this. And they'll say, well, let us know how it works. Once it's working, come back and let us know. And we'd be happy to talk to you about investing. And it always makes me laugh, because that's the opportunity is now. It's not when it's already done. Then it's easy. And so they want the easy. And I was like, well, look, if you want to make potentially 30 or 40% on your money, you have to be in something that's early that looks crazy. And that's what happened with people that invested in Tesla or SpaceX that were early when it was crazy. They've made gazillions of percent. Like they've done really well. Now is not the opportunity that it was 5 or 10 years ago. And that's the same thing here. So you have to be thoughtful about that. If you want something that's certain, you're certainly going to be broke. Like that's really what it boils down to.
And now it makes a lot of sense. You mentioned that you moved to the area to be close to it. You definitely need a lot of hand holding and close management. So besides yourself and your partner, David, I think is his name, who are some of the other key management team that is doing this with you?
So the people that are involved are the visionaries and the operators, and so you have to have a combination. It's really interesting. I see a lot of people wanting to have big ideas, but they don't want to do the work, and so we have a combination of people that have big ideas, and then people that have been in the trenches, and what they love is building it, executing. And so we have our chief operations officer Josh, we have our CEO Kyle. And these are guys that have been around. Josh has been in the lumber and manufacturing business for 20 years. Kyle's been in this space with engineering and building things for the last 40 years. And so the team is deep, and it's also deeply trusted. So you've got experience, and you also have people that have known each other for decades. I can't even begin to tell you how big of a deal that is, because you bring in people that are just all brand new. You don't really know what culturally they're going to, how it's going to mesh. So whenever I'm looking at anything deals wise, I'm always curious, like, what's the team? And when I see a team with especially in real estate, you'll have teams, and usually it's a team full of resumes. It's a team full of resumes. I've done this many houses. I've done this many doors. I've done this many things. And so you put a bunch of people together, and collectively they have 912 years of experience, but they've never done anything together. They're not really operating. And I always look at that very skeptically. My question is, who's going to actually make this happen on site? And then oftentimes there's nobody on site. It's a third-party management company doing something. And I'm like, it's not that it can't work. I've done it and it didn't work. And I've seen a lot of people do it, and it doesn't work nearly as well as when you have people that are there. So our team all the operators are here. They live and breathe and bleed this plant. I'm here to be as whatever support I can be. I'm the least talented person in this organization in terms of operating this thing. I don't know anything about operating a manufacturing plant, but I do know people, and I know capital, and I know how to bring things together. And so we all know what lane we're in, and we're staying focused on that. So the people that are the rest of the team has very specific. They're not just there because, for no particular reason. It's very thoughtful. And so I would encourage anybody that's looking at teams, ask, is this person doing something, or are they just a resume that's being thrown on this thing for their quasi experience? I don't know that that's a whole lot. There's a whole lot of value there just to have somebody there. I think that that's usually a smoke screen, and it doesn't really create a lot of potential value or security in the deal just because somebody happens to have their resume tied to a deal. What are they actually doing? And that's what's going to make or break a deal. It's the execution of the operators.
Yeah, that's excellent. And you mentioned that your role is sort of bring the right people together and provide whatever support you have. You also brought in the capital, at least from the onset. Are you kind of doing this full time? Is FrameTech your sort of main focus now, or do you still have other businesses going on at the same time?
So FrameTech is my focus. What's evolved, and there's a lot of books that talk about how you build a business or you buy a business, and you have people that run the business, and you just go off and drink margaritas on the beach or something. And that's an interesting theory, and it's usually total nonsense. That there's look at people like Elon. Elon's worth $200 billion, and he's in there tinkering with things, and he's in the middle. And nobody else is Elon. That's probably a terrible example, but what I've found to be really powerful is do everything you can. If you're an entrepreneur, you can either start off by hiring people, and just like we did with FrameTech, you have the right people and you let them run. I did it the other way with all the other businesses. I went in there and started things, and I was building a plane from scratch. I don't have a whole lot of interest in building a plane from scratch anymore. I would rather go buy the plane and then hire a pilot. So what's happened is the other businesses, whether it's EQRP or My Gold Advisor, these things that I've built over years, they have CEOs, they have people that are capable and are running those. I don't think I'm smart enough, or quite honestly, I don't have enough hours. I mean, we all have 24 hours a day. I don't have any more hours. So am I going to be a great CEO of 10 different things? The answer is no. And so my job is to think about things and bring people together, and then find the right people and get rid of the wrong people. And ultimately that's what I feel is my narrow niche. And so I'm not leaving that niche. Somebody's not going to pull me and get me to start something else. I know what I'm doing in my space, and I'm staying in my space. And I think there's value for everybody to do that one thing. They're great book, by the way, by Gary Keller, called The One Thing, right? Do the one thing. It's not the 10 things. It's the one thing, do the one thing. This idea of diversifying and doing all these, people chase all these shiny nuts, they're like drunk squirrels just chasing shiny nuts. And you stop chasing shiny nuts, and then embrace your nut, and then harvest plant your nut and let that thing grow. And unfortunately, people are chasing them, and then they eat them, and then there's nothing growing. And it's like, all right, that's not how you're going to create lifelong, sustainable financial freedom. You got to embrace that nut.
So do you think all your prior experiences with starting the 70 or so businesses contributed to what you found as your lane? You mentioned building a plane, which seems a very different kind of, I don't know if it's a business or just a hobby, than what you're doing for EQRP and now with FrameTech. The one thing, if you can say, is your skill set that you're trying to really hone in on.
The skill set is saying no to almost everything and holding the vision on the one thing. Okay. And then being obsessed about it. There's one of Grant Cardone's books, Be Obsessed or Be Average. I mean, anybody that's going to make a huge impact or make a big difference or become financially free is going to have a bit of an obsession. The people that have the biggest dent in the world are the most obsessed. There's just not an exception to that. I don't care whether you're talking about Oprah or Jeff Bezos, or there's an obsession about something that really deeply matters. It's not about, I love 50 things. Nobody has a huge impact that loves 50 things. And somebody will say, well, what about Richard Branson? He's got 50 things. He had one thing, and he just drilled onto that thing, and then he did something else. And so there's all those other businesses. What taught me the most was all the flops, all the fails, all the losses, all the blood, all the tears. it wasn't when anything won. I don't even remember when anything won. I remember all the losses. I remember all the pain. And that's the thing that I think people avoid. They're avoiding all the opportunities to grow. There's winners and there's learners. There's not winners and losers unless you don't actually learn anything, and then you're a loser. And people go, well, I don't want the judgment. Like, man, everybody's judging you anyway. Everybody's looking at you and they're judging you for about 2 seconds, and then they're focusing on themselves. They're not even thinking about you that much. But people get obsessed with social media and everybody's highlight reels, and like, oh my God, my life sucks. I don't have 14 Lamborghinis like Ty does, and like all these crazy things that are all smoke and illusion. I literally woke up in the last year and looked around, and I was like, man, a lot of things changed, because my head was down for years. And it was funny to me, because most people are so busy, addicted to their crack called their media, their cell phone, their iPhone. And that's what they spend their time getting distracted by. I literally felt like I lost years of that, which was really helpful to not be distracted. I was just busy grinding and 7 days a week, and it was super unbalanced. And people go, well, what about, the other stuff in your life? And I'm like, I didn't have anything else in my life. Like, I didn't have relationships. My health was not great. And is that a good plan? No, it's a terrible plan. But it's seasonal. Like, if you look at somebody like Michael Phelps, what did he do for 10 or 12 or 15 years? He swam in the pool 10 or 12 hours a day. And that's all he did. Did he have anything else? No. He ate. He ate and he swam. And that was it. Like, there was nothing else. And he's the most decorated Olympian in history. And so, is that the right path for most people? No, it's a terrible path, because you literally have no balance in your life. But there's a price you pay. And the difference between people that are super successful is they just chose to pay a price. They chose to say, I'm going to embrace the pain. I'm going to embrace the suck, as a Navy SEAL would say. Like, that's the process. There is no hack. I love Tim Ferriss's books. I love the 4-Hour Workweek, but it's a bunch of garbage to think that you're going to hack yourself into wealth, or you're going to hack yourself into a beautiful body. Like, you're going to have to go do the damn work. The work is like a 4-letter word anymore. I don't want to do the work. I just want a quick tip to do the thing, to get to the outcome. That doesn't happen. Like, you don't just go to the gym, look at it, read a book, and then you're magically fit. Like, you spend years, and it's a routine, it's a habit, and you eat the right things. Same thing with money and investing. You do the things. This is an overnight success story with Frame Tech that took 30 years to get to. So, people that say, well, what should I do? And I'm like, you should plan to have a 10-year plan. And they say, oh my God, that sounds like forever. I'm like, 10 years is going to pass. Like, you might be dead, but you're probably going to be alive. And you can plant the seeds now, and then allow the universal law of lag for those seeds. Like, you look at a garden and you look at the beautiful trees that produce all the fruits and the shade and everything else. What happened? Somebody planted that seed, or it blew around, or a bird threw it down 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And so people just, I think there's an impatience that has that people have embraced, and the people that are making it are the ones you don't hear about until they make it. But what were they doing the previous 5 or 10 years? They were grinding, and that is the secret, and everybody hates it.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love what you said. You mentioned Tim Ferriss. Oh, he's definitely a grinder himself. I mean, I think he even admitted in some podcasts that, because people challenge him, right? Like, 4-hour work week. Do you really mean that people can just work 4 hours a week? He's like, no, because I worked so hard. I'm like a super, like, above normal workaholic. I can outwork almost anybody. I think his point of writing that book is more so to create a system, or create processes and whatnot to focus on the things you want to focus on, right? So I follow Tim Ferriss. I think he has a lot of good ideas, whether it's health or business. But I think going back to what you were saying, right? It's good to put your head down. It's good to focus. But you've jumped around in a bunch of different businesses, and things do change. And sometimes it happens at a really fast speed. For example, now it's AI, right? Everybody's talking about it. How can we, focus, but at the same time, not losing sight of the big trend that is going to probably disrupt everything, like AI? So what's your take on that?
My take is things are going to change faster than our biological systems are going to be built for. I think the exponential, and I learned a lot of this from working with Peter Diamandis and studying him and hanging out with him a little bit. just the nature of the world with technology, everything is going to change much faster. As biological beings, everything is very linear, it's very sequential. One of the reasons that we're getting so sick is because we're putting so many things into our body, food-wise, that are not natural, and our body doesn't have decades or centuries to actually adapt and change. We're being forced to deal with all these processed things and toxins and everything else, and we're not built for it. So it's no different in our brain. Our brain is trying to think through how do you think through exponential things in your brain? Like, you need a damn supercomputer, and our brains are pretty super, but we're getting to a point where it's going to be really hard. And so I think one of the powers, this is going to seem crazy to some people, the power in dealing with the exponential speed and change is to slow everything down and get more present. It's to actually see things, because otherwise you're literally going to chase yourself into death. Like, you're just going to be like running, ragged in every direction. That's one of, truly, that's one of the secrets for me, is to narrow and cut things out and say no. I had a thing called a life book. It's like a big book, 200-page book that I wrote. And it's all my different pieces of my life that are important. And when I first did this 13 years ago, I wrote it, and it was huge, and I had all these dreams and all these things. And what I've noticed in the last 3 or 4 years is I've been hacking and cutting and reducing. And that's been really powerful, because it allows me to say, okay, what's really important, narrow in on that and go for it. With everything changing so fast, it's really important to pick. And then the other secret is know when to say I'm done, know when to say this is not working. It's hard, because the question is, am I at the 1-inch line? Am I right there about to score? Or am I just beating my head into a wall, and I need to stop and it's like, why do you, Japan, it's crazy, beautiful place. I've been there and love it. But that culture that doesn't want to allow banks or businesses to fail has been in this really weird economy for decades, because they won't allow anybody to say, okay, it's dead, it's done. Instead, they prop things up, which is what people do. We keep doing the thing instead of saying, okay, I quit. Why? Because we don't want to be judged. And what you're doing is you're clearing out the old. You're like burning the bad, and then you have this ash, and it fertilizes the next thing, and it opens up space for the next beautiful garden that's going to happen, which is your life. So there's this dance. And how do you figure that out? Part of that is reflection. Part of it's stillness, and part of that is having really trusted people around you that you can ask, what do you think? And then they'll give you honest feedback, because we're so blind. We have blind spots. We can't see ourselves. That's why we have coaches. So having people around that can say those things, and then being willing to say, okay, that makes sense, or say, you know what, I'm going to trust me. When I had a company 8 years ago that I launched, I remember it ran out of money, and everybody around me, the team, the advisors, they all said, just move on, go do something else. And I said, thank you for your input. And the answer is no. I closed it down, reimagined it. And ultimately EQRP came to be because I was willing to go alone. So how do you figure out whether you're supposed to go alone or quit? Or I think that's a process. You build the wisdom. You go, in my case, you go bald and gray. You're gray in the front and bald up top. And it happens through experience. And there is no hack. There's no 4-hour work week. Tim was right. You're going to grind. You're going to work your butt off. And he certainly did that. He did not do everything he's done in 4 hours a week. His damn interviews are 4 hours long. So like, one of those a week? I don't think so. I think Tim is probably one of the hardest workers that exists in the world. I think he creates because he grinds and because he cares. And so it's sort of funny, but you're right. It was a lot about systems. And one of the systems that I would encourage everybody to embrace is finding that place of stillness, because things are changing so fast, you will not be able to keep up. You have to be willing to sit still with your thoughts and see and feel and experience in the moment, or you'll blink and you'll be dead.
Yeah, all great advice. So what do you see kind of the future for Frame Tech? Specifically, what role are you going to play? Are you going to be the chief operations officer or marketing person? What's kind of your medium to long-term plan?
If I was the chief operations officer, I guarantee that company would fail. I am the wrong person. We have the best I've ever worked with in terms of a COO. Josh Lewis is our COO, and he's the one that will lead the operational rollout as we continue to disrupt the industry and really the world in this space. The people that are there are the right operators. My job isn't to be an operator. My job is to to bring these things together and understand how the capital works and the fuel works, and be able to use the experience I have to say yes to things and no to things and help navigate us through. Because ultimately, this is something that can be rolled out all over the United States and really around the world. This technology and what we're doing to solve the housing problem, which we need more of. Like, I don't think, I'm not in the camp of Bill Gates that says we need to have 7.5 billion less people. Like, that's going to be good for the world. Like these idiots that in Davos that think we need to have a population reduction, I think that they're crazy. And I think that they're kind of genocidal. I just don't believe in that. I think we're going to, more people, like Elon says, we need more people. Like, that's why he has like 10 kids, more babies. All right. So we have more babies. We need more housing. So we're part of that vision. There's plenty of space and more cooperation. So the vision and my part of that is to help expand that, help to create that opportunity in other places like Texas and the Carolinas and Tennessee and Florida. And maybe somebody will say we want to build one of these in New Jersey or up in the north. I think ultimately this technology and the impact of this will be everywhere. We're letting that organically happen and help guiding it. So my job is to be more of a trim tab on the back of a boat. It's to help navigate and make sure that we're heading in the right direction. But I'm not the captain of the boat, and I'm not the oars. I'm not the engine. I'm helping to make sure that we stay on course, and that's, I feel really good. And I think that comes from all the things that I've screwed up in the past, and learning from those and being humbled by those. I can have rational conversations. I can be wrong, and it doesn't hurt my feelings when I'm wrong. I pivot, and it's a useful skill, being able to embrace when you're wrong, which is probably more than you're right, and just say, okay, yeah, new information. It's funny, you see this in the politicians in Congress. They never want to be wrong. I mean, there's a few of them that'll say, yeah, I have new information. And then we just like beat them up. Like, oh my gosh, you're wrong. And you're changing. And it's like, I have better information now. And information changes at the speed of light. So that's one of my, if you will, superpowers, that I can embrace things and say, okay, better information, I'm changing, and I'm pivoting. And people respect that and they trust that.
The reason why I asked that question was because I almost kind of thought about a lot of the operational stuff that have to be taken care of, and marketing certainly is a very important piece for any kind of company. You mentioned New Jersey, that's where I'm based. For your company, for example, how are you going to solve the shipping problem, right? Because I would imagine it's not easy to ship framing wood pieces. So you probably have to have different plans. So there's really a lot to think about, and I'm sure it sounds like Josh is going to do a great job at that. But I'm definitely looking forward to having more affordable, efficient supply of framing. But it sounds like for you, it's really kind of the putting the right people and right resources in the right place. So that's certainly very helpful. So, like, what would you say is kind of a title for that role? Or
yeah, I mean, my job as the chief investment officer, my job is to really deploy resources and then expand resources as needed. One of the things that we found in this process was when we first had the vision grew, which also created a lot more need for more capital. And it was to be able to support that and say, okay, we're going from 40 to 60 million dollars. And so saying, okay, this makes sense. This project is a better project at 60 million than it is at 40, even though we're in the middle of it. And so we're going to go expand the pie. So my job is to think about that stuff and then work with everybody and support it, and not be the, and I love our attorneys, but if you have, like, most attorneys are good at saying no. And that's because their job is to prevent problems. And so if they say no, there's no real problem. But if you had attorneys running businesses, nothing would ever happen. It would just be like stuck. So my job is to find ways to yes. It's to say, okay, this is a great idea. And then occasionally to say, yeah, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to delay coming online. We have a new idea. So it's a dance, and and there's no perfection, but there is a lot of wisdom from the previous experiences that lead me to be able to work with our team and for them to trust what I'm thinking about, and for me to hear them and for us to work together. So I think ultimately that's what it is, more than anything. It's being able to see the vision and then figuring out how to keep that vision on track, and then fueling the vision so that everybody can do their job. Their job isn't my job. My job's not their job. That's one of the things that you learn as you get older, to stay out of people's roles and let them do their thing. And sometimes it gets frustrating because you think you have a better idea, and sometimes you do. And sometimes you just need to shut up and let things evolve, because that's why you have great people. So if you're here's the lesson that I think is kind of interesting. If you find yourself getting involved in everybody's job, you probably have really bad people that don't have any skills, or you're an egomaniac. But oftentimes you just don't have, and this happens with businesses. It's like, well, I can't afford the great people. So then you end up, like, I used to be my own attorney. That was the dumbest plan in history, because I'm not a lawyer. But I was like, oh, well, I can't really afford. Now I have an in-house attorney that's with us, and I don't have to act as attorney. That's been incredibly useful and a huge blessing. So the sooner you could have great people, the better off you are at tapping into your genius. Otherwise, you're going to do everything at like a very mediocre level.
Yeah, I can agree with you more. Going back to you as an entrepreneur, when did you kind of realize we're going to be an entrepreneur?
I think that part of being an entrepreneur is just, I think that there's part of you that just is born that way, that you literally are curious and you want to go solve problems, and you hate being told no. So if that resonates, if you're listening or watching and you're like, yeah, I hate that, that's me. Well, you're probably an entrepreneur. So I don't, like, it's funny, these schools of an entrepreneurial entrepreneurship, like you go to college and stuff. I'm like, okay, I mean, there's probably some really useful tools and ideas and things, but it takes a special kind of crazy to be an entrepreneur. Like, you got to be willing to go in there and, like, I'll give you an example. I tend to go out and I'll spend time at a restaurant or a bar or something, and I'm sitting there and I'm literally working and studying and reading and writing. I'm not doing what most people do at bars. They go there and they watch basketball or something, and that's what I do. And I do it every day, and I do it on the weekends, and I'm thinking and I'm solving problems. And when I'm with people, I want to talk about how we're building things. And so I think that being an entrepreneur is just something that, it's like who you are. So that's one of those things. People say, well, are you born or are you taught X? And I'm like, well, with entrepreneurship, most of the time, I used to think everybody should be an entrepreneur. I have reevaluated. This is a great thing where I've learned, okay, that was dumb and I was wrong. And years ago, I used to push people, you should invest and you should be an entrepreneur. And it's like, yeah, maybe not. That's not necessarily the right thing, because for a lot of people, it freaks them out. Like, their mental state is going to be disrupted to high heaven if they go down that road. So I think acknowledging who you are and then finding a way to work that into creating financial wealth is important, instead of trying to force things. Forcing things is only going to break you spiritually and financially and physically. So I happen to thrive in the entrepreneurial space. I have a threshold of pain for mistakes, losses that most people would make most people cry. And that's fine. It's not a good path. Most people should not do what I did. I mean, I bought my first investment house on a credit card. That's a terrible idea for almost everybody. Probably a bad idea for me too, but it did get things started, and I could deal with that potential pain if I made a mistake and it blew up. So acknowledging the truth. Whatever is true for you, I think, is important. And if you don't know what that is, get help from somebody that can help you see the truth. But if you're not dealing with the truth and you're just following along somebody else's book or their plan or podcast or something and going, yeah, I'm going to do what they did, that's the wrong plan. You need to do the right plan that fits you, because you'll thrive in what fits you. If you try to force it with somebody else's plan, it's going to be hell on earth.
Wow, that's brilliant. I mentioned to you, I spoke to the CEO of EQRP earlier. It's not for everybody to be an entrepreneur, but I would say everybody should think about investing, right? So do you have any advice on that, especially nowadays in the inflationary environment and with all these changes going on? How should people think about investing, right? The stock markets is only one avenue, but unfortunately, that's what most people know. There's real estate, there's alternative investments. What's your advice for people in terms of investing?
So I have another book coming out called Turnkey Retirement. And it's really thinking through that exact question. It's a great question. And the way that I look at it is, you have to be rational with a big picture plan. I think what I've noticed and I know this because I've seen it, the most people have a plan for the next 5 minutes, but they don't necessarily have a plan that they're willing to stick with for the next 10 years. And so having a plan, like what is the vision? And we do something at EQRP called the MAP, the Millionaire Action Plan, that I created. And it takes people through that process. It's very holistic. When you go to most financial advisors, they say, okay, you're 37 and you want to retire at 65. And at 65, you're going to need $14 million because you need this many dollars per year, and you're going to pull out 3.5%. They have, this is their formula. Like that's it. And we just go a lot deeper holistically and get people to a place and say, okay, look, if you're going to do this, you're going to have to engage. You're going to have to, you're going to have to be more active. You can't just be totally passive. You can't just throw your money out there and like hope and smoke a bunch of hopium that it'll actually work. There has to be an active part of this if you want freedom. Now, there's always the caveat. If you're starting with 10 or $20 million, you can pretty much park that in treasuries and probably be fine with your passive income and do nothing. That is not the case for most people. They're not starting with 10 or $20 million. They have to get to 10 to 20 million. And the other thing is people say, well, if I just have the passive income, and I'm like, look, if I hand you an apartment complex with $10,000 a month or whatever, you would pick the number, and you don't have any experience, you are going to kill that investment inside of 5 years. It'll die because you'll just make you'll do dumb things because you don't have the experience. So what do people do in terms of investing? You get started in something you start with a plan, vision wise, and then you say, okay, and this is probably something to do with somebody else. It's not something you do on your own, because it's like, how would you know what you don't know? You don't. So this is where mentors that have actually been out there and done things, coaches and masterminds with people that have already been down the path, and you build a plan and then you execute. Part of that is being rational. Like, we live in an irrational world. We live in a world where you go to a highlight feed on any social media, and all you see is amazing successes that you're like, wow, I am so far behind. And then you feel terrible, and you're trying to FOMO your way into jacking yourself into something in the next 6 months, and all you do is bleed. And you go, well, what happened? Well, you didn't have a plan. It wasn't rational. And so having a plan and then saying, okay, there's a capital build process in finance. You don't just say, okay, I'm gonna go buy 5 houses and then I'm done. Like, if you're starting off, or you've got whatever, 100,000, 500,000, you're going to have to build capital. That's part of the process. And I keep saying build for a reason. Building is something that takes energy, and a lot of people just avoid it. They'd rather just have things magically happen, like they're in some Wizard of Oz episode. And the reality is, you got to build something. So you build things, and what you're also building externally, you're building internally. You're building the experience, you're building the wisdom. So thinking about what can I build that's going to build me too? That's the process. And doing that, eventually you'll get to a place where you're going to understand how to create passive income. And this doesn't have to take 25 years, but it's not going to take 25 minutes. That there has to be a buy-in, a commitment, because the reality is, you have a plan. I mean, you've probably heard this before. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And that's what people are doing. When they don't have a plan over 10 years, they are planning to fail. They're just going to go, wow, I learned a lot. I see this with people that lost a bunch of money with some of these scams that were out there with these tax scams and things we've seen in the last few years. A lot of people have heard about these. And it was people that said, oh, I have this amazing upside. There's no downside. I don't pay taxes. And it's like magic, and it happens instantly. Well, hello, duh. If you have any experience, you know that that's a scam. Like, there's all sorts of chaos, and people took advantage of that, and they cost people hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. So getting around somebody, to really sum that up, getting around somebody that you are truly paying for their insight and wisdom, and that you're not investing with. So just detaching them. It's kind of like why therapists are not allowed to sleep with their patients. Like, you're not supposed to be dating the person that's giving you advice, because it's very biased at that point. So it's the same thing with investing. You have somebody around you that their only job is to give you honest feedback and tell you the truth. That's the greatest thing anybody that's investing can do. Make sure you have people around you. If you think, oh, if I just read a book or listen to a podcast, I know everything, you and your money are quickly going to depart. Like, they're not going to be together anymore. So there's a process. It takes time. It doesn't take 25 years, but it does take years, and it's not foolproof, but it's pretty close. Like, you just go through this process. I just don't think people have the patience anymore.
Yeah, I love what you said about finding a coach or mentor whose sole job is to advise you, and they are not going to sell you anything or help you with your investment. But what's your advice on finding the right coach for you?
Date. It's kind of like getting married. I mean, I know some people like they marry the first person they kiss, but like the reality is you do want to like look around and you want to interview and you want to think and you want to experience. Like there is a dating process to, and that might be listening to 20 different people's podcasts that are all in that business, or it might be going to somebody that you've paid attention to, you've read their books, or you've watched them in real life, and you go to them and you go, I'd really like you to mentor me, and I would like to pay you for that. And here's why I say that. If you go to somebody and say, I'd like you to be, people have said this to me, will you be my mentor? And I was like, you can ask me a question, but like, if you want me to engage, I need to know you're serious. I'm not saying then when people hire me, it's a lot of money for most people. And why? Because I want them to be committed. If somebody comes to me and says, well, I just want free advice, it's going to be wasted energy. They're not going to do most of what I suggest. It doesn't mean I'm always right, but I just don't want to spend the time. And most people that are super, super busy and building something in life do not want to waste their time on somebody that's not going to run with it. On the other hand, what's really fulfilling for people that are building things is to be mentors, is to provide advice to people that then run with it and do things. So the reason that I think it's so valuable that you go pay somebody is because you'll pay attention to what they're saying if you're paying them. Mm-hmm. There's a pay principle. And so go find the person. And if it's $99 a month, you're not going to do crap with it. Now, if it's $50,000 a year, I used to pay somebody $120,000 a year for about a half an hour a month of advice or consult. And oftentimes he's like, yeah, what you just said is a good idea. And I'm like, great. And I go do it. And I just needed somebody to say, yes, like you're not crazy. Mm-hmm. So was that worth it? 100%. It helped me go bankrupt. You're like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It also helped me go through that process to where I needed that. That's what I needed. I needed to go through that so that in my mid 40s, I've gone through all this stuff. I've lost everything 3 times. You have to go through whatever process you need to go through. And what a mentor does is they help accelerate that. So I'm not saying you need to go bankrupt. I'm saying if you have to go bankrupt as part of your process, a mentor will help get you through that thing. And it's less likely you're going to go blow yourself up if you're listening to somebody that has wisdom. Whatever your process is, the value is that you compress time frames. You're not going to sit there and spend 10 years. You're going to do it in a year or 2. And it's not going to take you 40 years, your whole life. You can compress it in 5 to 10. And you tell me what that's worth. Like when somebody says, well, this mentor or this mastermind or this coach is expensive. And I'm like, compared to what? Do you know how much it costs to make a mistake? It's freaking 1,000 times what you're talking about. I don't care if it's $25,000 per meeting. I can promise you I've done enough things where I've lost $250,000 or $1 million or more in one moment that it doesn't matter what the mentor costs. It was way less. So if you're thinking big, if your vision for your life is something beyond just today, if it's more than today, then there's a value that's unprecedented with people that can help guide you and give you feedback and give you truth that would take you otherwise years to get to.
Wow, that is really good. Yeah. So I've been listening to Tony Robbins lately a lot, and he talks about the story every time, I feel like. So how he started is he paid this, I think, I don't remember his name, but kind of who is doing pretty much what he's doing, right? And then he paid whatever amount it was, but it was much more than he could afford at the time. He always says totally worth it because that's how he got started, and couldn't have done it without that. So yeah, definitely there's a lot of value in finding the right mentor, getting the right advice. 2 cents is, like they say, only worth that much. So you don't want to just get anybody's 2 cents.
Absolutely not. I think you said something that's really important that people should listen to and think about, that finding the right mentor. If you find the wrong mentor, you'll learn. And then you go find another person. Like I've had lots of mentors and I've had lots of businesses and were any of those early ones the right ones? No, but they were perfect because they helped me in this process that I'm on and this path. And that's one of those things. It's not about perfection. It's about freaking progress. Any progress is better than perfect inactivity and inaction. And that's where most people end up staying. They're staying in the quiet comfort of the solitude behind a screen. And I mean, safety and inaction is really compelling because we can't really get hurt. We just have, sadly, it's like a lot of people that are in abusive relationships, at least it's predictable. It's like, okay, this person only punches me in the face once a week, or like I can deal with that. But if I left, the world might eat me. And it's kind of the same thing. If we left our life, what would it be like? I might die. So we stay in our life. We don't change anything because we're protecting the narrative of safety, security, and consistency. The reality is our dreams, our hopes, our potential, and the lack of regret is on the other side of that, where we have to go do something. Regret is the worst. It's the hell on earth. Meeting the person that you could have been at the end of your life is the worst possible scenario for anybody's life. That's not what I wish on anybody. It's no regrets. It's getting to the end and saying, wow, that was amazing. Not, oh, damn, I wish I would have done something, but I was too busy being safe. Like nobody does that. Nobody says that. It's just, but we tend to live that way. And so it takes movement in some other direction. And that's up to us. It's a power. It's a choice.
Excellent. 2 more questions before we wrap up. Do you have any book recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite books is Mastery by George Leonard, and so he and I are both martial artists. He passed away a number of years ago. The book is about Aikido, which I also study, and life and business, and really it's the essence of mastery that it speaks to everything that we go through, whether it's raising kids or whether it's building a business or whatever it is, going to the gym. There's always this process, and he talks about the plateau process where you just go and it seems like you're just going through motions. And this is one of those keys in that book. When you're going through a process where you're plateauing, nothing seems to be happening, but you're building this plateau. And eventually one moment, something pops. You're like, wow, like a breakthrough. Did that breakthrough happen then, or did it happen from the previous months and years of all the plateauing? And that's the process of mastery. And mastery is not a moment in time. Mastery is a process. It's a life. It's how you live. It's your day to day. And I love that philosophy. It allows us to say, okay, it's not about I'll be happy when this thing happens. It's about falling in love with the process and realizing that's your process of mastery, not to mastery. I would recommend that to every single person that's paying attention to their life and listening right now.
Cool. Yeah, I'll check it out. I don't think I've read that before, but it sounds awesome. All right, last question. Where can people find out more about you?
Finding out about me is the best place is go to LinkedIn and bounce around. If you're interested in frametech.com that's the project. I think the project that I'm working on is a reflection of my life, and it's led me to this thing. So you can see a lot, the energy that's there, what that feels like. That's a big part of my soul. It's really interesting when you really fall in love and you become obsessed with something. You can learn a lot about somebody just looking at their art. And to me, business is art. And especially when you're building something, there's this artistic piece. And so it's those two things, you go to LinkedIn or you can go to FrameTech. And then if you're in Arizona and you're in the area, come by and say hi. Let's take a walk underneath something that's being built from the ashes like the Phoenix. It's very cool to see that and touch it, and maybe just inspire you a little bit.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Great. I'll definitely check out the website at least. Not sure when I'll be in Arizona, but I'll let you know when I do.
Good.
All right. Thank you so much, Damion, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.